We're back. Say some disclaimers before we get started. Viewer discussion is advised. Parental advisor is advised. Please have an open mind that you be able to receive the sage advice and paramount morals of the story. I want to say a copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. I have no legal rights again to the videos that you're hearing. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. Allowances is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, teaching, news report, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright status that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. There's a lot of subliminals, and if you're focusing on the morals of the story, please don't forget to like and subscribe and smash that bell button. It helps support the channel. And please don't forget to watch the full video from beginning to end so you don't miss a single detail. Without further ado, the Book of Enoch and more.
The Watchers, the most infamous angels in the Book of Enoch. These were not the gentle, glowing beings people imagine when they hear the word angel. No, these were powerful celestial beings sent to Earth with a single command: observe humanity, guide them, and never interfere. But what happened next became one of the darkest stories in ancient scripture. According to Enoch, the Watchers descended onto the mountains of Earth in shining brilliance, towering in size and overwhelming in presence. And as they observed mankind, something forbidden happened. They began to desire the daughters of men. This desire grew into obsession, and obsession led to rebellion. In secret, 200 angels made a pact, swearing an oath that they would all take human lives no matter the consequences. Their leader, Semjaza, knew the punishment would be unbearable, but the others insisted, "Let us all swear and bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, so that we may not abandon this plan." And with that, the fate of the world began to unravel. Once the Watchers took human women, they passed down knowledge never meant for mankind. Sorcery, weapon making, astrology, enchantments, the power to manipulate nature itself. Humanity advanced rapidly, but it was a corrupted kind of knowledge, kind that led to war, destruction, and chaos. Their children, known as the Nephilim, became monstrous giants, beings so massive and violent that ancient texts say they devoured the resources of the earth, then turned against mankind. Enoch describes them as creatures whose footsteps shook the ground, whose hunger could never be satisfied. They dominated the earth like living storms of destruction. And as the Watchers watched their children tear apart creation, they realized their rebellion had spiraled into something even they could no longer control. Heaven finally responded. God sent the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, to confront the Watchers and cleanse the world of the Nephilim. These archangels were not just messengers. They were warriors of divine judgment. Michael was commanded to bind Semjaza. Raphael was told to imprison Azazel, described as the angel who taught mankind metalworking, war, and seduction. Azazel's punishment was severe. He was bound hand and foot and thrown into the desert abyss, buried beneath jagged rocks until the final judgment. And the rest of the Watchers? They were forced to watch their children, the Nephilim, fall in the great flood. Their cries shook the heavens as they begged Enoch to plead for mercy, but their fate had already been sealed. According to the Book of Enoch, the Watchers were cast into a shadowy prison. The ground is described as a place of darkness, heat, and suffocating silence. They remained there until the end of days, awaiting judgment for corrupting the world. But here's the question that scholars and theologians still argue about today. Did all of them get captured? Or are a few still roaming the earth bound in spiritual chains but not yet destroyed? If the Watchers were truly sent to observe humanity, who's to say some aren't still observing us now? From the shadows, waiting for the moment they can influence mankind again. Comment amen if you agree with God wiping out the giants. So in the end, the story of the Watchers is not just some strange side chapter tucked away in the Book of Enoch. It is the blueprint for what happens when divine beings cross lines they were never meant to cross and drag humanity down with them. We started with angels who were supposed to watch from a distance, guardians stationed on the high places of the earth, looking down from Mount Hermon at a world that was still young, still innocent compared to what it would become. They were given authority but not permission, power but not freedom to use it however they wanted. And the moment they turned their eyes from God to the daughters of men, everything began to unravel. Their oath on Hermon, that vow to stand together in rebellion so none of them would back out, was the point of no return. From there came forbidden knowledge, weapons, sorcery, seduction, vanity, the twisting of nature itself.
81, over here.
And then came the Nephilim.
The pearls definitely goes down to the
Realized something important. According to Enoch, the Watchers were not just guilty of breaking a rule, they were guilty of rewriting the destiny
81.
of the entire generation of humanity. That is why the response from heaven was so severe. The flood was not just about corrupt humans, it was about wiping out the monstrous offspring of these angels, severing the bond between heaven's rebels and the earth they had infected. But punishment for the Watchers went deep. Enoch describes them weeping, begging, asking him to intercede on their path. God's answer is chilling. He tells them to deliver a message to them. Petitions will not be heard. Their sentence is already decided. They will see their sons die violently. They will be chained in darkness until the day of judgment. And the knowledge they gave to humanity will testify against them.
Guardian was destroyed long ago.
Think about that for a second. Enoch even hints that some of the spirits of the offspring, the dead,
What's that mean?
became the wandering, violent spirits that torment mankind, the origin of what many traditions later called demons. So when people talk about demonic oppression, about spirits tied to violence, lust, or manipulation, there is this ancient idea in the background that what we are dealing with are the leftovers of the Watcher's sin, the spiritual residue of a crime committed before the flood. That raises the question that sparked this whole video in the first place. Where are the Watchers now? According to Enoch, the core group that broke the oath and descended on Mount Hermon are no longer active in the world the way they once were. They are bound in the abyss, in a place described as deep, hot, and utterly cut off. A prison beneath mountains and deserts where they wait for final judgment. Azazel is said to be locked in a desert wasteland, covered with jagged stones until the great day. Semjaza and the others are kept in chains under the earth, unable to escape, forced to watch as history moves forward without them. Yet the influence they had is still alive through the knowledge they shared and the spirits of their fallen children. Some traditions even suggest that in the last days, the barrier between realms will thin, the abyss will be opened, and the spirits that once terrorized the world will be allowed a final period of chaos before they are destroyed for good. Whether you take that literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, the message is the same. Rebellion against divine order does not just vanish. It leaves scars on reality itself. And that is why the story of the Watchers still hits so hard today. It is not just about freaky giant chained angels. It shows us how dangerous it is with men, whether angelic or human, inside their desires. The Watcher, to watch, to guide, to protect, to explore, to inspect, to indulge. Mankind was meant to grow slowly into wisdom, before still bring advanced knowledge onto a world that was not ready for it, and it ended in violence and catastrophe. Look at our world now. flooded with information, technology, and power that outpaces our morality. The parallels are hard to ignore. We are living in a time where we can edit DNA, manipulate reality through media, and influence entire populations with algorithms and AI. Yet our character often lags behind our capabilities. And that is the terrifying beauty of the Book of Enoch. Because the story of the Watchers is only one chapter in a text filled with secrets the ancient world tried to bury. This book isn't just a record of fallen angels. It's a map of hidden realms, cosmic wars, heavenly laws, and beings so strange and powerful that even modern readers struggle to comprehend them. Enoch describes places where the souls of the dead wait for judgment, chambers of fire beneath the mountains, angels who control planets and stars, prophecies of creatures rising from the abyss, and visions so overwhelming that God himself had to strengthen Enoch just to survive them. And the deeper you go into this book, the more you realize why it was removed from most traditions. It shows a world far stranger, far more dangerous, and far more supernatural than anything people are used to hearing in church today. These aren't just stories. They are glimpses into a spiritual reality that shaped our world long before we were born. So if you want me to keep unlocking the forbidden pages of Enoch, if you want the mysteries of the angels, the prisons beneath the earth, the prophecies of the end times,
Okay, everyone, we're back, and so we were discussing the Anunnaki, and James, can you elaborate on the possibility that there are more than one ET race, for example, another race other than the Anunnaki? Can you expand on that?
Yes, it's been postulated by some that there may be more than just the
Was
Anunnaki.
deliberately destroyed.
Another
And
ET
still feel the
race
hate of the act.
or two on one or more of the planets of the Nibiru system. I don't really know much more than that. It's just something that I've heard. It does sound possible, and we must remember that the Anunnaki not only warred at times with other ET races, and then oftentimes used Earth humans and armies of Earth humans in the various areas of Earth that they control as proxies vis-a-vis, their enemies. But they also warred amongst themselves too. That what we see on Earth, this notion of this patriarchal, dynastic, hereditary rulership, where the firstborn son of the first wife is the heir whenever the ruling monarch dies or is supplanted for whatever reason. The firstborn son is usually the heir apparent. Well, that seems to be the case with the Anunnaki, because they were forever warring against one another. There were two clans, and it was familiar with the lore, the Enkis, so-called the Enkyites, and then the Enlilites. There were two, I think they were half brothers or brothers, I can't remember exactly, but they each had their own dynastic line of those they begat beneath them, and they would war against one another. And one of the most fascinating stories that I've read is what's been described as the second Pyramid War, where Inanna was an earthborn Anunnaki. She wasn't born on Nibiru. She wasn't born in space. She was born here. And her lover was Dumuzi, according to the ancient text. And long story short, Dumuzi wound up getting killed, and Inanna blamed Marduk, son of Enki. Marduk has been identified as Ra in the Egyptian cosmology.
So Marduk is
God,
Nimrod,
very interesting that
which is
alien in the original Stargate movie was Ra Martin. And so,
Nimrod killed
Inanna, enraged
married his
because
mother.
her lover Dumuzi was killed, and
That's
it's
her
possible through Dumuzi she was hoping to beget a male heir, and now that's out the window because Dumuzi is dead, and so she wages war against Marduk, and at one point overcomes Marduk and his forces, imprisons him in the Great Pyramid, wants to keep him in there, basically starve him to death, until the Anunnaki pantheon intercede and they decide to just to rescue Marduk and then exile him, right? Get him out of the area he controlled, which is modern-day Egypt. And the Inanna Marduk story, saga, is just one example of these Anunnaki warring against each other. As events unfolded according to the text, I think it's the Enuma Elish also, the Babylonian epic. Inanna was also given the Indus Valley, what we would now call the Indus Valley in India, the subcontinent, and she created apparently a whole civilization there, which lasted for some length of time, 1,000 years, and then it disappeared. And there is evidence of nuclear war having taken place in the Indus Valley. There are areas of the subcontinent in India where the sand has been vitrified, turned to glass, which some suggest is the byproduct of nuclear weapons detonated. Yes, nuclear war, and as was the case with the Trinity site, which is, in the overall scheme of things, was a low-yield plutonium device, about 18 kilotons thereabouts, in the near Alamogordo, New Mexico. That vitrified the sand there, turned it into like glass, and so there are places in the world, I think the Sinai Peninsula is another place, and according to the ancient text, these weapons were also unleashed in the Middle East, and so we have physical proof of that in the vitrification of sand and deposits beneath the surface. So we have corroborating physical evidence in the form of the byproducts of weapons of mass destruction unleashed. So the point of relevance is if these Anunnaki feel inclined to renew or start up all these wars again because perhaps they haven't evolved much since the last time they were here, well, that's another issue. That's something else that we have to take into account because in a very real sense, these Anunnaki regard humans as their property, as their genetic creations, if you will. I don't really know the command structure and or the relationship between the Anunnaki and the apparent ruling reptilian hybrid human elite here on the planet that is running the underground bases as well as the surface. I don't know what unique connections we have. There may be some connection, some affiliation. They may be antagonists for all I know, right? That's one of the things we have to find out. So I just thought I'd throw that out there also, that these Anunnaki, they managed to include a lot of their more onerous attributes, their genetic progeny of greedy rapaciousness, of warlike tendencies, and hopefully some of them, and I think some of them have, I like to think some of them have spiritually evolved to the point where they are beginning to have second misgivings and then starting to second guess whatever the Anunnaki agenda is, right? And there's another factor that must be taken into account. I recommend your listeners check out Wes Penby's, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name, Wes Penra, E-N-R-P. He has a marvelous website called wespenra.com, and he's done a tremendous amount of research about the Anunnaki, all the different ET races and interactions with humanity. You don't have to take it all on board. Go by what feels right to you. Go where spirit moves you when you navigate his humongous website. But he goes into a lot of this, the motivations, and what's interesting also is he provides a lot of convincing data which shows that these Anunnaki were worshipped as gods all over the world, and adopted a number of different names and guises, but they were all the same Anunnaki. They're all the same ETs. Like example we mentioned earlier, Marduk was Ra, Thoth was Ningasida, who was, I believe, one of the descendants of Enki. He also makes a very interesting point, which I kind of resonate with. He says that we've been led to believe that Enki is the good guy in all this, that he is our father, so to speak, that he is the half sister. I think her name was Ninmah. There's so many of them. Ninnersag, and created the Adamu and then the female counterparts, and that in effect he's our creator God. And like I pointed out earlier, not according to the Aborigines, not according to the Native Americans. They say we got here a long time before that. Aboriginal elders say we've been here for 1 million years, right?
That is a great point. That is a great point to point out the different cultures' story of origins and how biased it is with this particular Sumerian Babylonian.
Basically, telling the scribe what he abducted at the beginning of the book. And the scribe is telling abducted, but the scribe is just walking along. So the next boat comes along, abducts him and takes him over to Enki and God. He was being obeyed. And once the has been passed on down throughout the ages. And so Wes Henry makes a very good point that what if it's the other way around? What if Enlil and the Enlilites were the ones that if we had all the available data and the benefit of hindsight, and if we were to objectively look at all the available data, maybe some of us would come to that conclusion independently. Yeah, you know what, based on what information we have, and there's been so much of it lost or destroyed or deliberately misrepresented, maybe Enlil, in our limited understanding in terms of good, bad, whatever, etc., maybe he's really the good guy in this saga, in this saga, in the psychodrama that's going on. Maybe the Enkiites are not the good ones, you know what I mean? So that adds a whole nother to the story of Inanna battling Marduk, who was the son of Enki, and on and on and on. Maybe Enlil had a good reason to wipe out the at least, of course, I hate to use the term collateral damage, but by wiping out the creations of Enki and Ninharsag, I'm sure that had a collateral damage effect on a lot of other people who were brought here by other ET races and the animals and life forms, etc., etc. That much being said, maybe there was something about these genetic constructs that Enki and Ninharsag created that Enlil thought was completely over the top. Maybe there were these creatures or beings were so over the top evil that he felt they didn't belong here. I mean, that's an interesting twist on the story. I mean, that's just me. That's just my twist. I'm not saying Wes Penrith came up with that idea as far as, the justification or rationale why Enlil would want to wipe out the creations. And what's interesting, the creations of Enki, but what's interesting also is the Noah archetype on the hybridized half-human god / Anunnaki, if you will, archetype, who was told by the god or gods, okay, giving you a heads up, you're going to have to end the story to bury, get to a mountaintop, build yourself a ark, whatever the case may be. That story is consistent in many parts of the world. In Polynesia, we have similar stories where the god tells the Noah archetype by whatever name that culture calls it, again, the patriarchy. There's going to be this, distribution of something, etc., etc. It's a very common story all around the world, and also the stories of the Native Americans, Choctaw, Cherokee, how they traveled large distances. They fled underground. I hope we talk about the Sipapo, the whole back to the inner earth. And then some of these tribes had traveled a tremendous distance underground, and then either by internal intuitive guidance or whatever higher dimensional guidance or ET guidance they were receiving at the time, they decided to pop up onto the surface through an inner Earth entrance, pop up onto the surface and become civilization anew.
What did you find?
That's
Zephyr went to Kashyyyk.
But a lot of these
Cordova
people
mentioned someone
dismiss out
named
of hand,
Tarful.
these
A
uniformitarian ethnics
They
that
were old friends.
that the book stays the
Is he
same
still
for
around?
There's only one way to find out.
billions
to
of
go
years,
to
nothing
Kashyyyk.
interchanges, when it's actually the opposite. And it's not only in the geological record and the mass extinction fossil record, but it's also in the lore of all these different cultures, where a lot of them either survived by being on mountaintops, or they, often as not, they went underground, and then they surfaced after a long travel underground, surfaced elsewhere and began civilization anew. Right? So,
James, I just want to interject here and get back to something that you were talking about before, if I may.
yeah, sure.
In reference to Anunnaki and Inanna, there is a book that was put out by B.F. Ferguson, and it's called Inanna Returns.
Yes.
Yes, and that is Inanna's story. She
just
tells
open the way
the
for the
story
Empire?
herself of exactly what happened and how destructive the patriarchy was and her role and how she was, surprise, vilified, right? And all of the stories that were written down. But when I read that book, I resonated completely with it being as the truth. I'm not saying that it's not or anything that I follow along, but her telling the story was so visceral. It was so real. You could literally feel it. You're having to feel. And this was the truth as far as she was concerned. And Inanna Returns, the name of the book, it describes the story of everything that happened in that era, according to Inanna herself. The only perspective where the first character in the history, Inanna, is speaking for herself.
Yes. I'm aware of that book. I began to read it, and it sounds very interesting. And likewise, I'm intuitively guided to check it out, right? And for you, the family stories that she described herself as originally coming from Pleiades in that book.
Yes, they do. The whole family comes from there, and that they were supreme geneticists, and they look reptilian. They could make themselves look absolutely human, like some of the best, most beautiful specimens of humans can make them, or they can maintain their reptilian appearance, no matter what they're. Yeah.
Yes. And it should be pointed out that this because before the most recent spate of celestially driven cataclysms, give or take 11,000, 12,000 years ago, plus or minus a couple thousand years, but these cataclysms lasted for a long time. A lot of the advanced civilizations before that were matriarchal, and certainly a lot of the most indigenous cultures were matriarchal. They worship the divine feminine, the divine God, etc. All this is eradicated. A lot of it was as a result of the celestial cataclysms, or as what's hinted at some of the Anunnaki texts, the deliberate intervention by the Anunnaki, like Enlil, for example, to flood out humanity, right? And then afterwards, because there was only vestiges of surviving humanity that surfaced, there was far fewer of them to have to deal with. It was either genetic, Eastern voice patriarchal religions upon them by the astronomer priest hybrid ruling elite that was installed. Now, you make a very good point about Inanna Returns, right? Because what Penman talks about, and I believe, I haven't read all the books of Sitchin like you have. To me, it's astonishing because the books are so dense. It's like, it's like my head just like spins around and swivel when I try to read a chapter of this. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you managed to read all of them, right? Which I give you credit for that. And if memory serves, when Wes Penman says that, according to his interpretation of all different information he's collated, he says that Nibiru, and I have reason to believe this too. Nibiru may have come from another star system. He feels it may have come from Sirius. If memory serves, because I've kind of bounced around the gigantic website, all the different subpages and all the different levels of learning. I'm only going by memory. If memory serves, he talks about how it came initially from Sirius. Now, Anana is saying, according to the book that you've cited, is saying that
I said it was either
now, what's interesting is Barbara Martiniak also talks about
a fallacy or a lie
she's getting from her
adding to the scriptures
Palladian
or diminishing. So
that the Palladians also had a lot of karma they had to discharge. And the things that they did from
although it's
our
not the norm in the sun,
has so radically messed up the timeline and so radically messed up things on Earth that from their future perspective, they're trying to rectify things. And again, it speaks to this ongoing effort to fix timelines, which I've been totally told and downloads I've received that yes, the timelines have been messed up, they've got to be fixed. And what's interesting too, and this is a whole other story and a whole other topic of discussion, but there's something called the Mandela effect, and I think there's something to this, where a lot of people here on the surface, we have clear, distinct memories of certain things that have occurred, which thousands of, if not countless people were aware of and consciously aware of and remembered at the time. But now, fast forward X number of years, there's like no record of any of these things ever happening, even though it's in our conscious memory, right? That's happened to me. It's happened to other people.
Me too. Exactly.
There's well-known movie actors and actresses that we were told passed away, but they're still around, right? Now, some of it may be due to a hoax, like the Challenger hoax, like, the space shuttle that supposedly blew up, and now they're finding evidence that these people, these astronauts are still working and they're still alive, and they look the same, they just look older than they did. But is that a result of this timeline manipulation? Who knows, right? Or cloning, because this stuff delves into all these different aspects. But cycling back to West Penra,
I want to say something about that too. When you
and just hold that thought. I'll just for once I'll try to get this in 20 words or less. The notion that Nibiru actually came from another star system, which is backed up in a way by the Anana Speaks book, I think there's something to that. And I would go further to say it's quite possible Nibiru itself is an artificial construct. It's actually a huge craft. And again, there's 4 different levels of civilization as described by Kardashev. He's this researcher. He talks about level 1 described by Kardashev.
At Seeker 1, yeah. So let's check out at Seeker. That's my queen. Thank you for the comment. Going back to it, I'm just trying to bring out Bible is not a historical fiction as well. So
Researcher, he talks about level 1 alien civilizations which have learned to harness the resources of the planet they're on and can even manipulate the planet itself via weather weaponry, seismic weaponry, so on and so forth. There's the second level of advanced kind of civilizations which can harness the power of the sun and colonize nearby star systems. A third level of civilizations which can harness and control the power of an entire galaxy, okay? And maybe even levels above that, like a 4th level, I think he talks about, which is, they're in the hyperspace, hyperdimensionality and whatnot. So and also keeping in mind I think I've exceeded 20 words, but I'll wrap it up. Keeping in mind the imagery from the Soho satellite of these gigantic planet-sized or bigger craft, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Nibiru itself is a craft. and further that because of its ability, if it's utilizing a field propulsion system, artificial gravity, whatever the case may be, when it powers up, it will distort the time and space around it, which could explain in part why these remote viewers that I know, that I consider to be world-class remote viewers, right, have said that when they scan this thing, sometimes it's in our dimension, in our solar system, and sometimes it's not. So, anyway, take it away.
Wow.
Wow. Where do you keep all of that?
I know, right?
James? Where is the storehouse? Because I'm not seeing
Amazing.
it in the picture.
Yeah, amazing.
That's just incredible. Okay, before I lose my train of thought, getting back to what you were saying, there were a couple of points. Inanna Returns is a story of what happened with human history according to her perspective, and that is the only perspective coming from her that I am aware of. And like I said, it resonated with me. In her perspective, she explains why, I forget who this one was, Anlil or Anki, one of her brothers, because she's the sister and they're brothers and sisters, but the one that hated humanity, the one that is causing all the problems here, I think he is called Marduk. I get all the names confused. My God, it's been more than 20 years. But the one that she locked in the pyramid.
Marduk. Yeah, Marduk.
Okay, Marduk. That's where patriarchy began, because he hated her so much, and he vowed revenge, and her mistake was not letting him die in that pyramid. Okay, she let him out.
Finished him off. She should have finished him off.
She should have finished him off, but she didn't. She let him out.
Yeah.
Okay, it's that stupid woman's compassion again. All right, gets her in trouble every time. So this is what happened. So he just was angry. He was completely psychopathic, and to this day, he's sitting in ships because they have this immortality capability where they punch all of these buttons and things, and they control every single person on the planet. This is discussed in her second book, Hyperluminal, by B.S. Ferguson.
Read that also, yes.
It's fascinating, and yes, she says that they do come in, the Palladians, they messed with humanity so much that they felt remorse, they felt that they needed to make amends, they were forced into a council, I forget what the council is called, but there is an interstellar cosmic council that they were forced to be part of and forced to make amends with what they have done with the human race. And so she got very clear about the mistakes that they made, and she did her amends, and she wanted to fix everything. And one of the things that they started to do was reincarnate as human beings to experience themselves what human beings experience. And that's what they've been doing all this time. They had to become part of the experience to understand what they were doing. And that's talked about in her second book. So that's Inanna and Inanna Returns. Now, Wes Penray, I've been to his site, the Wes Penray Papers, I think it's called. And years back, he was really getting into all of these stories, not just the Sumerian texts, but all of the other creational theories, and he was trying to piece them together. I mean, that is a colossal effort, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's incredible. So he was going by a lot of the information that has been put out there, for decades by untold so-called quote-unquote authorities, right?
Yes.
But I found it very patriarchal and bent to all of the stories that men have been telling over the years. And in every case, the woman was just this second-rate, third-class creature, and I couldn't take it. Now, kudos to Wes Penray. Kudos to him that I went back to his site to investigate last year, and he has since changed his story because he has been consistently gathering all the information he possibly could, and he is a good researcher. So he has come across information and enough valid information that has brought him to the point where he understands how patriarchy was created and that it was created as a hatred of the mother. He got his information together. He's included what patriarchy has done and has been done. I don't know why people don't talk about it. It's such a huge picture in the whole thing. I mean, it's the very foundation and basis of everything that is happening on this planet is patriarchal, male domination, control, and destruction.
It is.
Okay. Wes Penray has corrected himself.
Yes.
And he has included the story of what's happened, why it's happened, the queens who have been horribly vilified, degraded, and all of these other things. He explains that. So he gets into that and he explains why patriarchy exists and that the queens are the ones who have been wanting to restore life to its original pristine nature, and they have not been allowed to. And he's got all of this added information. So that's the impression I get from his site and where he's at now. So at least he's got a more complete picture of what's happened, not just that one-sided nonsense.
Yes. And like I said at the outset, when I brought up West Penrose, it's like people have to make up their own mind. They have to, frankly, I don't have the time to read every single one of his articles. There'll be a voluminous amount of information.
It's massive.
And so all I do is I go where Spirit guides me. I don't take everything he says on board. I go with my own, intuition and innate guidance. But I do believe that even the stuff that I may not agree with, which he has put out, still can guide me to where I need to go or guide me to the information or understanding which I need to have at any given moment. So I'm thankful for that. And what we've seen also is in this harsh patriarchy that has been unleashed and is getting knocked back. I'm glad to say it's just going to be a process. What they've done is they've taken all these symbols and images and iconography of female deities and completely perverted and distorted them and made them all out to be inherently satanic and evil. And a lot of that has to do with the church and whatnot. And so I'm glad that he's going in that direction because
so am I. Because
someone needs to, because the patriarchy removes us from source. It detaches and blocks us from source, and it blocks us from our own innate power. Telepathy, astral abilities, remote viewing, all those are inherently right brain, right hemisphere, divine source attributes. Then they shunt us into the left brain, the logic side, and they fill our brains with nonsense, indoctrination, dogmas, you see. And then there's laws, scribes, rulers that enforce those dogmas. That's how it works. And it basically enmeshes us in this simulation matrix and cuts us further off from source. So
it just makes us stupid.
It makes us stupid in so many words. Yes. But what? Yes. Thank you for bringing up Inanna, because we see this in other things too, like how the Talmudic scholars created this demoness deity called Lilith, where you have to take the base model of this divine feminine mother goddess archetype, and then the Talmudic scholars, they're women-hating misogynists anyway, they create this entity, this demoness entity called Lilith. And what's interesting is Lilith has actually world and come through people I know, people highly gifted, galactic human types, women. And it's interesting what Lilith has told them. And Lilith has spoken to them. What's interesting is what she said. She's tired of being vilified. She's tired of being demonized. She's tired of being made the scapegoat and the villain. Everything, right? They've taken her name and they've spun it all around. And she's quite pissed off, frankly. And she wants there's an aspect of her that wants revenge, and I can understand that. You know what I mean?
But she's powerful. I want to say something. I have received a direct healing from Lilith herself.
Yes.
So I do not tolerate people in my presence or in my company vilifying her. But please continue.
Yes. And we've seen the same thing with Callie, where there's a dual aspect to it. There's destruction, there's creation, there's the end of cycles and the beginning of cycles, and we've already talked about the end of the fourth world and the Hopis' visions of the beginning of the fifth world. And that can, from their standpoint, their perspective, it can only come about by an end and a destruction and an unraveling of the old world. So there's aspects to Kali that embody that. But all these fundies, these fundamentalists of one stripe or another, see is, oh, look, she's got blood dripping from her mouth. She's
No, you know what that? You know whose blood that is? I'm going to tell you right now, and I want to make this clear to anybody who misunderstands who Kali is. Kali, people just need to read one sentence in the Hindu tradition from the Hindus themselves through the pantheon to which she belongs. Is that Kali is the destroyer of destroyers.
Yes.
She only destroys the destroyers. That's the blood that she's got dripping from her, and she is killing those who vilify life, who take life, who destroy life, those who are greedy, corrupt, murderous. Those are the ones she destroys. That's who Kali is. I hope that is made clear. It's plain and simple.
Yes.
That's who she destroys.
And what's interesting is in some traditions, Kali is identified with Anana, right? So that's interesting that there's this female archetype, but it was probably more than just an archetype. That was actually a being, a super being, that was female, that basically meted out vengeance and destruction upon what she perceived to be evil, negative, patriarchal beings, right?
Yes, and Inanna had problems with money. That's precisely why.
Yes, and actually, quite frankly, I mean, someone accused me of playing the duality game. Oh, James, you're just so embedded in these duality polarities. But you know what? We need these women out there with fantastic personalities, and we need these highly evolved beings out there like yourself, basically. Because from my perspective, the women have always been the pioneers in the UFO field, as far as alien abductions are concerned, as far as the hardcore lab research is concerned. And even in the surface level activism, truth movements, women have always been at the forefront, even though they suffer far more slings and arrows than their male counterparts. Males don't have to deal with, well, some of them do, but not to the degree that women do, of all these psychopathic reptile trolls that harass them and then send them these vile, venomous private messages on Facebook, which cannot be blocked. Right, that's just how it works. And also this unleashing of all these people forget about all these titles and these labels. Oh, that's divide and conquer. You just don't like all these immigrants, these Muslims, and these North Africans and these Africans coming in. Forget the titles. They're raping, pedophile, misogynists who demon-infested, entity-infested. The warriors, they've been unleashed. No different than the Soviet Red Army that went on a rape rampage through Central and Eastern Europe. When Eisenhower stood down the Western armies and allowed the Russians to take over, the Soviets actually. No different than the rape of Nanking, the Japanese army in 1937. No different than the Ottoman Turks taking over Constantinople in 1453. The raping of the statue that took place as a result. This is a rape invasion, and it's a direct response to the comeback of the divine feminine, the resurgence of the mother goddess divine principle. Who are these rapists, these hybrid sewer scum rapists going after? They're going after women. They're going after young girls, right?
Right.
And they've been turned loose. They've been turned loose. And it's uniform. It's happening in all these countries. So it's a concerted effort. So yes, it's global. It's global. It's got nothing to do with their alleged creed or whatever the case may be. That's just a distraction. And if people think that, they can't see the forest for the trees. And if people are that confused about something that blatant today, how could they possibly understand what we've been talking about, the wars of gods and men, and how these gods, Enki and all these other gods, Marduk and whatnot, their male scribes, under the direction of the male god, are writing this version of history, which always seems to favor the patriarchy, always seems to favor the male.
Yeah. And that is suspect in itself, and how no one sees this. It's just mind-boggling. People don't see how one-sided this is. And speaking of that, I have a question about the Nephilim. Sure. And there's a quote in the Bible.
So they're going to talk about the Bible again now.
And the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took to them what wives they chose, and they gave birth to children, right? Something like that, right? Do you know this quote?
And they begat children of renown, or some have interpreted as giants, which...
Yes, who were the insane ones who then became the corrupt species on this planet. Do you think that these are related to the Anunnaki or related to the Neophyte story?
Yes, I would say at some level. But where I would differ from Wes Penry, is that if his writings are any indication, and I can see why he would feel this, that the Anunnaki were the... and although they did divide the world up, into spheres of influence among themselves, they certainly were not the only ET races that had influence. And he would be the first to say that. But and I do believe there's something to the notion that a lot of these Anunnaki were revered as gods by different names throughout the ages in different cultures, different parts of the world. That much I agree with. But I don't... do I consider themselves to be as powerful as all that? Yes, I believe there's an element of that too, because Nibiru may be a craft, right? And they have to be at least a level 3 type of civilization, where they got their own portable sun wherever they go. I mean, they're very high up there as far as hierarchy and as far as power throughout the cosmos. I would agree with that, but as far as like virtually every deity being another name for an Anunnaki, I'm not too sure about that. That much being said, I do believe that the Nephilim, at least as described in whether it was Genesis and some of the other texts, that I believe that, yes, it's quite possible that it was the Anunnaki with their not only genetic engineering and splicing their DNA with perhaps a hominoid, as Lloyd Pye calls it. That's another great video people need to watch. It is the Everything You Know Is Wrong by the late great Lloyd Pye.
Fantastic.
See this on YouTube, where he goes into detail about how the Anunnaki did all this, basing it on the biological genetic evidence. And so, by either genetic means or through mating, and I think eventually they were able to create these genetic hybrids that were compatible as far as mating purposes were concerned. They did create this subclass, this hybrid race of Nephilim, for lack of a better term, that had a lot of their attributes. They had their longevity, that lived for, like Noah, for example, Methuselah, Enoch. I mean, these guys hung around for a long time. Yeah. And they had these powers and metaphysical attributes, and they were kind of the installed, many of them, as the elite ruling class above when the Anunnaki were away, or when the Anunnaki needed someone to rule on their behalf when they were like warring against each other or elsewhere. So I believe that the Nephilim can be regarded as the offspring, if you will, of the Anunnaki. Definitely.
Yeah, I think there's just another term for it, but the stories are all too similar, and they're obviously happening based on who's telling them from what culture, right? So that's the only difference I'm seeing.
Yes, the cultural interpretation and whatever spin the gods, if you will, gave to that particular culture, right? That made sense to and was easily assimilated by said culture. Now, the one thing I want to talk about before we run out of time is there is something to be said about giants, right? In fact, Joseph Farrell has got a book called, if memory serves, Genes, Giants, Monsters, and Men. It's a very good book, and there are other people that wrote books about giants, and the Native American lore, to just cite one example, throughout virtually all Native American tribes, is that there were giants, that there was a time when the and the stories vary, but they're along these lines, that when the Native Americans went to a certain part of the country, they stumbled upon these giants, and these giants, some of them were, you can't really say they're cannibalistic because they're eating humans, smaller than them, right? Get in my belly kind of thing, right? So that is, and a lot of the tribal elders and a lot of the Native Americans still don't like to talk about this whole concept of giants. It's still troubling to them. It's within their genetic memory. There's a recent book written by a former pilot in the Royal Australian Air Force, Marius Boyaran, I think his name is, and he wrote a book called Solomon Islands Mysteries, Giants and UFOs in the Solomon Islands, or something like that. And he went there. His wife is a Solomon Islander, and he went to the Solomon Islands. This is northwest of Australia. Is where the U.S. and the Japanese engaged in a series of battles there, 1942 and on. And they talked to the locals, and it's well known within the locals, and even like a governor of one of the islands had seen eyewitness testimony, seen a giant, a very tall giant, and it was rampaging, and they barely got away with their life. These giants are not only cannibalistic from a human perspective, they prey on humans, and they've been doing this for as long as the islanders remember. It's possible that they get from one island to another through subterranean underwater tunnel systems. Systems. There's also well-established, well-known UFO bases there, and there's also mineral issues there too, which Marius Boyaran talked about, as far as certain types of minerals, which the powers that be are very interested in. And so these giants, they tend to be of the hairy giant hominoid, as Lloyd I would call them, variety, but they can be quite large too. And like in Australia, a name that some of the Aboriginal tribes have, or at least one of the Aboriginal tribes have, for a certain type of giant, translated comes out as taller than the tallest gum tree. And if someone just, goes online and looks at a picture of a gum tree, that's pretty tall indeed, 30, 40 feet or higher, right? And so we're not just talking about 10, 12, 15 foot tall giants. We're talking about bloody giants. Giants.
Serious giants.
And what should be borne out is that some of these giants may have come from a planet originally where the gravitational pull of the planet, whatever the case may be, different from Earth. So, it allowed them to grow to such a huge size. And then you look at our own paleo ancient history, the animals, the flora and fauna, tended to be humongous. When the mammals came along after the dinosaurs, they were like gigantic, what we would call rhinos, or gigantic, different types of animals, but they were mammals, but they were just huge. And that was the case with the dinosaurs, and that was the case with some of the animals in the ocean. Everything was like there was an ancient. They were giant. There was an ancient scorpion, a sea scorpion that was like 9 feet long or something like that. So it's in the fossil record for giants, and also the fact that the Smithsonian has been hoarding, among other agencies, I would assume, has been hoarding all these giants. And what these people, they can't see the forest for the trees. There's not this proliferation of legitimate giant photos, skeleton photos out there, unless someone happened to get into that secret wing of the Smithsonian and take a photo, right? So when people make a photo and they Photoshop and they create like an image of a large skeleton, that's not the point of the picture. The point of the picture is the accompanying article about the fact that there have been giants and skeletons and all this all along. People look at the photo and go, Photoshop. They start bleeding like a sheep. They start chirping like some, bird has been hit on the head with a rock. That's not what's important. What's important is the article. We're not having photos, real photos of giant skeletons falling out of the sky. So, these people who write these articles, they go with what they got, okay? I don't begrudge them for that. If someone wanted to say, that, photo was Photoshopped, but yes, I do believe that giants may have existed in the past. I don't have qualms about that. But when they, make this blanket statement that, it's all unbelievable, more nonsense, again,
they're throwing the baby out with
the bathwater, and it must be understood that, again, we only can go by the distorted information handed down throughout the ages. Okay, we're told that For example, and I'm not saying this is exactly the case, but there might be something to it. We're told that the Titans were of necessity bad because Kronos, i.e. Saturn, wanted to eat Zeus and all of Zeus's siblings, and then Zeus managed to, with the help of his mother, Rhea, substituted like big stones in place of the children, and then they fooled them, and then these children grew up to be the Olympian gods, who eventually, and this also parallels stories around the world where humans battled the giants for control, for hegemony, where even the Native American tribes in their lore, they talk about long ago, it was a fight for survival between them and the giants. And Joseph Farrell talks about this in his book. And there's other books that talk about this, where it was either them or us kind of mentality, where if we didn't get rid of these giants, they're going to eat us all up kind of thing, right? I mean, see the Solomon Islands. So, but what if these Titans were not so bad from, say, even our perspective? Well, let's say that the Olympian gods in that story were just the Anunnaki by a different name, right? So who was it that the Anunnaki overthrew, or at least dispersed, or maybe even put in stasis? I mean, the possibilities are endless. Who was it that they displaced in order to assert or try to assert control in our solar system? I'd like to know that, because there's a knee-jerk response once again is, okay, I believe in giants, but they must all of necessity be bad. Well, maybe not necessarily.
No.
So we have to keep an open mind about this. We can't let these biases from these distorted and deliberately misrepresented ancient texts, patriarchal, most of them, cloud our reasoning. We have to go by our inner. In the final analysis, we have to go by our inner guidance and our intuitive guidance.
And a little common sense. So
a little common sense.
Okay. Well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's my opinion, just as for a last little opinion, that Nibiru is a craft. That's just my opinion.
Thank you.
Why I have come to that, I don't know, but it's the whole slew of information that I've been getting over the years. But that's my opinion, and it comes with its own little entourage of beings, crafts, entities, servants, whatever you name it. But Ari, we wanted to touch on something that you talked about earlier. There was some information that you came across with someone. Can you please talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, actually, I have information that I've come across, which is even probably as interesting as the Gil Broussard information, which I really, invite all the listeners to go ahead and do your own research with Gil Broussard. Very interesting character. I mean, his name, I shouldn't say character. He's really an astronomer, from what I understand. But I've listened to several of his presentations, and I think that the last one that I listened to was absolutely just, to me, mind-boggling, because he kind of like brings together all of the history, all the records, and he ties it together, and he puts all the pieces of the puzzle so that we can see this clear picture that shows that this Planet X situation has been here before, and that it's on its way here if it's not here already. Now, my question, has always been, well, why is it that more astronomers, that there's a lot of amateur astronomers out there, why aren't they capturing this? And is it still invisible? Is it infrared that, people can't readily see it? I personally have seen, that same thing you've seen, James, at 2 o'clock by the sun. And so I've seen that. Now, I understand, too, that Nibiru could also be a craft. It's something that is very, something that I kind of know as well. There is a video if you go to YouTube and you put in, I think it's called Separate Society. That is the name of the YouTube channel. This gentleman has caught, or actually presented somebody who caught this on camera, and it looks like a planetoid with like holes in it, like it's almost like a craft. It's round, and it looks like it's made up of bolts. Okay, and this thing was caught on camera. This is something else that's like, wow, could this be the Nibiru? Could this be really the spacecraft, or, is it here already? So this is something, that we need to just take a look at and make up our own minds about that. But what I wanted to talk about, and I don't know that we have a lot of time left, I ran across this woman about a year ago, and I was told about her like almost at the last minute. I was on my way to Florida, and a friend of mine said to me, Ari, you got to meet this woman. I've just had lunch with her, and I just want you to meet her and tell me what you think. And so I went over to my friend's house, and she introduced me to this woman, and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to, what this whole thing was about or anything like that. Well, this woman starts doing a presentation on the fact that she was communicated with, I don't know how long ago. This is a woman that has had no experience with any New Age material, has had no experience with channeled information, is not even a religious person. And she was contacted either via some entity or some being or whatever, and given information that she needed to look at the murals that are on Venus. I said, okay. I'm just listening to this. And she goes, I was told that there are murals on Venus that depict the whole creation story. And these are replicas of what our creators look like. And then she pulls up a Jet Propulsion Laboratory picture of Venus. And when you look at it, you're just looking at it and you figure, well, you're not really looking for anything because you don't even imagine that stuff is there. But when she starts circling these things and you start really looking at it, really looking at it, and you go, oh wow, oh my goodness. And they have a picture of a depiction of Inanna there. They have a picture of the creation of the split of the cells, of how they actually genetically manipulated stuff. I mean, a whole bunch of stuff, the whole stuff that you guys are talking about. And it's really not my, it's not my forte, where that I can really readily discuss these things. So that's why I'm kind of like behind the scenes listening to you all. But when I saw this stuff that she pointed out, it's like, wow, is this thing really pareidolia, or is there something here? And
just interject for a second. There's a parallel with that with the work of a couple of researchers. I forget their names. They wrote the Sidonia Codex and the sequel, and basically through mirror imaging, overhead imagery taken of Mars, they were able to, with the mirror imaging technique of a terrain feature, create an image which was there to begin with. By mirror imaging, they created all these images of deities, of Mayan gods, of Egyptian gods, of Babylonian gods and goddesses.
Yep.
So, yes, that's also available, or it's also can be seen on Mars, too.
Yeah. So,
because it's called Reflections from Mars, and it's by George J. Haas and William R. Saunders.
Interesting.
Yes, excellent.
Interesting. So this woman wrote a book about this, and the name of her book is Divine Impressions. Her name is Elizabeth Follett, or Follett, Follette. So definitely check that out. I know that she has a YouTube on that, which actually shows these murals. But some of these murals are also on, I believe, on Earth as well. She shows that they're in Utah. And there's also a place in, I believe, Antarctica that actually shows reptilian beings and a spacecraft in Antarctica. Very interesting information. And then I kept, addressing her because she kept saying to me that the reason she was bringing this information now is because of the return of our creators. And I kept saying, well, okay, are these the Anunnaki that you're talking about? And she kind of really skipped over that. She wouldn't even address that. And then I said to her, well, are they coming back? Is it Nibiru? And then she wouldn't address it. So I kept asking her again and again, and she would answer everything else but that. So very interesting. I strongly recommend you guys take a look at that. I mean, it's like crazy stuff.
What's her last name? What's her name again?
It's Elizabeth Follett, and that's spelled F like Frank, O, double L, E, double T, E. The book she wrote was called Divine Impressions. And it's not a very thick book or anything, but she's got all her pictures there, and I know that she has a YouTube. Just, Google her name for YouTube, and she's got a very small little thing that she put together showing these murals. And it's really bizarre. But anyway, I wanted to address that. The same thing with Gil Broussard. I think you can go to, let me see, which is the one that I wanted you to look at. Go to Capricorn TV interview with Gil Broussard, Planet X. And that's the one that I really wanted you to see, Serena, and you too, James. I think you started watching it. Because this guy actually goes into the historical record and pulls out every single incident that this Planet X came through, and the devastation that was recorded. And he's actually been able to pinpoint the different times that it happened, and according to that, when it's supposed to be coming in again. And according to him, supposedly, he states it should be about this year, 2016, March 24th, 25th, 26th timeline. He's creating that time frame. So again, it's something that we should just be aware of.
Yeah, and he feels that it comes around much sooner than, say, Sitchin would suggest. Whereas Sitchin says roughly 3,600 years, I believe Broussard says more like 360 or something like that. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, something like that.
So I do believe that by the time February, March, April, May, going into June 2016, things are going to really be hopping. I really believe that. And two quick points I want to make before we leave is one of the sources of proof that Dr. Harrington had come up with when he was working for the U.S. Naval Observatory is the findings from the IRAS satellite. They realized that with the regular optical telescopes, they couldn't see anything, so they guessed that it may not be visible in the visible spectrum. Let's put up a satellite that looks into the infrared, and sure enough, they saw something, and it was first announced in 1982 or 1980, something like that, but it was observed by the IRAS satellite.
There you go.
It does not have its own luminosity. The only reason we can even see it is because when it's near the sun and in the corona or whatever, sometimes we can see it. A second point I want to make is as far as the concept of Nibiru being a crap, it's not unheard of, because a lot of your listeners are aware that in all likelihood the moon is an artificial construct. We only ever see one side. And there are other artificial constructs. Well, the moon is too close, it's too big, too, for one thing. It would be the fifth largest moon in the solar system, rivaling the biggest moons of Saturn and Jupiter. That's pretty large also. Secondly, there are artificial satellites elsewhere in the solar system. I encourage your listeners to go to the enterprisemission.com website of Richard Hoagland. There's a subpage there called A Moon with a View, and the moon in question is Iapetus, which is one of Saturn's moons. And when you look at it, and the way that Hoagland shows it, it's not a sphere. It's got edges all the way around. It's a spheroid. There's a large concave hole, and then there's a large equatorial kind of wall, for lack of a better term, at the equator, which is around 6 miles high. And so it's completely artificial. It looks an awful lot like the Death Star, oddly enough.
Yeah, well, that's what that that Separated Society video shows. That thing looks like a Death Star.
It looks like the Death Star. And also the Phobos, which is one of Mars's moons.
Yep.
It has predictable accelerations and decelerations and changes in altitude. And it's shaped for all the world like a spaceship. It doesn't look like a hunk of rock. It doesn't look like a sphere. It looks like a spaceship. So this notion that, Nibiru is itself a craft is not far-fetched. When when we look at it in context. So I'd like to say thank you to both of you for having me on here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's been really enjoyable, and I'd like to do it again sometime.
Oh, definitely. There's more to this conversation as new information comes out, right? And before we leave, I just wanted to make another point in reference to this woman, Elizabeth Follett, which I met, in person, when she was showing me the actual photos of these murals, of these depictions of these gods and whatnot. It's really kind of, like I said, it's not readily seen immediately, and she really kind of has to guide you. It's like, okay, here's what this thing is right here. Take a look at that and see if you see it. So it wasn't too readily, observed. It's not like you can depict it right away, but I was able to depict demons very readily, and pictures of greys, of actually the gray ETs, very readily.
Yes.
And she wasn't mentioning those.
Yes.
So that was kind of odd.
To Mars.
Yeah, right.
To Mars.
Yeah.
You can see demon entities of gigantic scale on the surface. Terrain features. You can see crocodiles, huge, what seem to be crocodile creatures. So yes, definitely.
So I just wanted to point that out, because I think it might all be interconnected. Who the heck knows?
And were these visible? These are on Venus?
Yes. On Venus. You got to go to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Like, you go to Google and look at maybe a picture of Venus. There's one that's from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory site or whatever that actually is a red rendition of the planets. It looks red. Venus usually doesn't look that way.
Yeah.
When you use that one, you'll be able to, and you zoom in, you'll be able to see it. And it's and the top half of its equator.
And we must remember that gatekeepers like Carl Sagan were instrumental in pushing the greenhouse effect on Venus. I mean, there's so many things that the academics and NASA lies about. If you remember, if your listeners remember, when they sent a probe to Venus, it was the artist's conception was that it would drop out from the probe, a big parachute would unfold. It would hang down from, I guess, ropes or silk lines, and then it would be attached at the bottom to this big kind of rubber housing, which would hit the Venusian surface, bounce around, come to a rest, and then it would start sending out telemetry. But if Venus is supposed to have a temperature of 800 degrees Fahrenheit, any kind of normal parachute would burn up the moment and we're all supposed to believe that it has tremendous pressure there, many times more than our planet. So just the fact that they would show us an artist's rendition of what they were planning to do tells you that everything that they've told us about greenhouse effect, the pressures on Venus, it's all nonsense.
Yep, absolutely. But definitely I would love to continue this conversation with you, James, if you're available.
Yes.
And, of course, Serena, it wouldn't be the same without Serena, that's for sure.
Yes, thank you for your input. I love the Anonymous stuff. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's good stuff there.
So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining, with this conversation, and thank you to the audience for tuning in. And, it's like I say tuning in because I'm so used to it, but obviously this is going to be on YouTube, because I think it reaches more people that way, to be honest with you.
Yes.
So, again, thank you all for joining Shattering the Matrix. This has been Ari Popel, Serena, and James Bartley having a great conversation today.
You ready to do this? get on top.
Our record shows you the negative.
I'll be more careful. Okay. Now where?
Come further. What were you doing in the desert? I was running. From what? You. For everyone that stopped here for the last 4 years. He wasn't going to let me go, ever. Why did Project Blue Book want you? They needed someone to do film equipment, but mostly because I spoke too much. Tell me about your interest in filming. I don't know, it all started when I got that 8mm camera for Christmas. I filmed everything at first. Our house, my street, my little sister playing. When did you start into the desert? I don't know, maybe a year later. Something compelled me to go there. Something compelled you. It was just what you doing.
Thanks, BD.
That saw it. Someone. Don't want to play with me, son. What did you do
Slides
with
to the
that
top.
footage? I showed it at the Nevada Film Club. Never thought showing my films there would lead to all this. Explain what you shot. It was different than anything I'd ever seen. It moved like it was alive. My hands were shaking, but I kept filming. How did people react? I don't know. I left my film recording with Bob. I don't like crowds, but you kept shooting. Yes. The very next night. So you were still compelled. I was worried. Worried? Yes. Worried that something bad was going to happen to them. Like what? A crash. I felt a crash. I had to go again. I had to see if they were okay. This crash. Is this what you showed at the next meeting? Yes. The room was more crowded than usual. Now I know why. Who was there? 2 men in the back. They didn't say anything during the screening.
Reading a new ship on scanners. It brought more firepower than we thought. How's our hull looking? Slightly damaged. Integrity and falling. That should still be enough to stop us.
just brought Nada to the
I had
table.
no idea where they were taking me.
Who are you?
Someone making the Empire
Just knew it was a
underway.
long time.
We're advancing on an imp landing pad up ahead. We're
They
going
run
past the point.
Copy that.
this place.
Let's make him even angrier. More troopers ahead. Take him out.
I have the fun after.
It's headed for us. Can you do anything? Hold on! Brace yourself, lady! Okay? You all right? Not doing that again.
You just wrecked a perfectly good walk. Got a name?
Come on, Kestis.
Say the word. What are you doing, Kashyyyk?
What are you doing here?
My companions and I came to Kashyyyk to disrupt Imperial supply lines. So, who are you looking for?
Local chieftain named Tarquin.
There's a reason he's evaded the Empire for this long.
You want to stay ahead of the competition? Of course you do. So you need to eat their lunch before they eat yours.
Empire from the Shadowlands.
See you? Reese? This is Sam.
What do you want with Tarth?
Jedi business.
Jedi are dead.
Now
Take that out of corpse. This pad supports an Imperial refinery that runs on wicked slave labor. Intel suggests that some of the captains there are guerrilla fighters.
I should help them. One of them might know how to contact Tarquin.
It's possible.
Hold on, wait a minute. The mayor's works wonders in his great secrets for Imperial. No, it is not built to close support.
We'll stay here and monitor Imperial transmissions. With a bit of luck, we'll intercept any distress calls.
Appreciate it. My lieutenants and I will scout ahead to prepare the attack. Join us when you're ready. Go, go.
Glad you're all right.
Oh, good to see you too.
Your plan worked. And now you want to follow Saul? You don't like that idea? I'm concerned with jumping from one risk to the next.
I fly my ship in the middle of the battlefield, and all talking about risks.
Why didn't you stop me? My job is to guide you, Anakin, not choose it for you. So here's my advice. The Empire's overtaken hundreds of worlds. There's a reason Saul chose Kashyyyk. Saul's goals may not be the same as ours. We should be careful. Yes, I'll keep that in mind.